The Kiseki series, which is translated as the Trail series in English, heavily builds on shared plot lines and complex political intrigue across many games. Since Cold Steel 3 relies even more so on understanding the happenings of the arcs and characters in previous games, welcome to the next installment in this series of detailed but still condensed summaries. I will be splitting Sky the Third into a main plot summary and a condensed lore summary that covers the necessities for the Crossbell and Erebonia arcs. Now let's hop right into the main story of the final Sky game. Trails in the Sky the Third begins 6 months after the end of second chapter. The Lusitania, a massive luxury airship built by the Rainford Company, is seen cruising above the skies of eastern Erebonia. The host of what appears to be a masquerade begins a speech as a woman begins talking to a masked Father Kevin. The host, Sir Conrad, is a recent new money merchant who has made a fortune partnering with the Rainford Company. The woman and Kevin continue their flirtatious conversation as the host rolls on, demonstrating how our new protagonist is a massive departure from the Estelle we've grown used to from the first two Sky games. Kevin finally walks away and prepares to get down to business. He scopes out the various other rooms on the airship and continues on to the top floor before he's stopped by some guards. He uses the church art of thaumaturgy to knock them out, then enters Sir Conrad's private quarters. There are various switches in hidden areas throughout the room that must be released. After getting them all, the back wardrobe slides over to reveal a steel door. Kevin correctly guesses the password for the security and the door opens to reveal a room filled with precious antiques. Kevin recovers an artifact called the Fool's Locket, which allows the bearer to pass off lies as truth. Unfortunately, the security is alerted and the door slams shut immediately after Kevin removes the item from its current stand. Kevin taunts the guards, who are all hired Jaegers, that arrive on the other side of the door. What appear to be massive magical spears pierce through the steel door, easily breaking through it. Kevin then breezes past the three guards and begins making his way back to the initial ballroom where the party is being held. He easily steamrolls through all the Jaegers on the way back, then confronts Sir Conrad for having a treasure of the goddess in his possession. Kevin's barrier easily blocks bullets, then he wipes out the final two guards. He knocks out Sir Conrad, scoops him up, and smashes through the airship window. The remaining Jaegers and the partygoers are absolutely shocked at the commotion, while a mysterious masked man is seen muttering how their tale with Kevin Graham is only just beginning. It turns out that the number 5 Special Ops Gralsritter ship was prepared to catch Kevin. He approaches his squires in a light-hearted manner, lamenting that he wasn't able to spend the night with the lady partygoer who approached him earlier. His Type A squires exasperatedly say they have no choice but to serve under Kevin, who is a dominion of the Gralsritter and commander of this particular ship. Apparently, these squires were the ones who transported the Salt Pail Arrow to Kevin back in SC. Kevin receives a call from Commander Selnit, who wants specific details of his successful mission. He's then commanded to take a short detour to Liberal to pick up an artifact that is being held under Gransel Cathedral. Kevin plans to head to Liberal alone, but is notified that a new rookie squire is being assigned to him during this mission. Kevin is none too happy about the news, but gets back to business. He sends the squires of his Merkaba to tie up the loose ends of his mission, while he gets off at the nearest airship landing port to board an international flight to Liberal. Kevin reunites with Dorothy, who completely forgets his name. It turns out that Dorothy took a complete detour trip to Calvard when she was actually supposed to go to Bowes Market. Once the ship touches down in Gransel, a very exasperated Niall comes out to haul Dorothy back to work. They have a short reunion before the two reporters have to head back. Major Sid comes to greet and escort Kevin to the cathedral. Kevin is introduced to a blonde woman in a white lab coat upon arrival. She expresses surprise that the Gralsritter employ people who are so young, especially Kevin, who holds the position of 5th Dominion. It turns out her name is Erica Russell, daughter of our very own Professor Russell, Tina's mother, and a brilliant engineer and researcher. The three are seen descending a long staircase under the cathedral as Erica demonstrates some of her trademark anger, ranting about her father, Tita, and Agate. They finally reach a great stone wall with no visible entrance. In order to proceed, Kevin requires the other two to go under a form of suggestion. They just need to think and believe that they won't tell anyone they don't trust about the place they're about to enter. A golden light appears and reveals the entrance the two wouldn't have been able to see unless they truly believed the suggestion. They enter a beautiful, expansive room that the church calls Primal Ground. Kevin doesn't deny that other rooms such as these exist below other cathedrals around Zemuria. He is shown to an artifact that was pulled up 3 days ago from the wreckage of the Liber Ark deep in Valeria Lake. In the flashback, Erica expresses her anger at the church and how they swoop in immediately whenever an object turns out to be an artifact. Researchers around the continent wish to understand the power source of ancient devices and how these artifacts are able to function, but they're never given proper chance since the Septian Church collects them. A large glowing object is then excavated from the waters, and detection devices pick up that it's emitting orbital power. However, back in present day, it's no longer displaying any power readings. Erica hopes to invoke the agreement the laypeople have with the Septian Church. If an artifact no longer demonstrates any active orbital functioning, it is exempt from collection by the church people. From Kevin's understanding, it's impossible to analyze an artifact that has lost its orbital power, but Erica still is more than happy to take a look. She actually reveals that the advanced technology that Ouroboros has displayed is worrisome, and is hopeful that this artifact can provide some answers. As Kevin ponders a final decision, a voice butts in, quoting church scripture and denouncing Kevin for even considering relinquishing the artifact. A sister of the church appears, while Kevin expresses complete inward shock. After introductions, Sister Reese makes a decision for all of them, stating that the artifact will be taken into church custody since it's most likely related to one of the septarians. Erica asks for a legal basis for Sister Reese's argument, and the latter brings up how the exact law states that artifacts are just property that belong to no one. They are simply abandoned objects. They turn to Father Graham to make the final decision, but Kevin and Reese hear a strange voice. The artifact suddenly opens up to reveal a small glowing cube. The dispute is automatically settled with this new occurrence. Kevin and Reese exit the cathedral together, and it turns out the two haven't seen each other in 5 years. Kevin awkwardly apologizes for not keeping in touch, while Reese states that her promotion to Squire of the Gralsritter is only to serve and protect him, and nothing more. The tension is lifted when Reese's stomach begins audibly growling, reminding Kevin of fond memories of her insatiable appetite when they were growing up together. They have some silly banter, and Kevin offers to buy her something to eat at the department store before the next airship leaves. Reese ends up buying all the food left at the store, but before they can head to the landing port, they realize that they're being watched. They head to the warehouse district at the port area to corner the person tailing them. It turns out to be our good friend Gilbert. He whips out his Jaeger equipment but is immediately wiped out by Reese and her Templar sword. Before they can begin questioning him, he pathetically tries to fake beg for forgiveness. He then summons an Ouroboros archaism, the Gia-Posh, but after the two are defeated, the artifact in Kevin's pocket begins glowing again. A masked man with long silver hair appears on a roof and seems to know a lot about Kevin. A door opens as they are all engulfed in a blinding white light. Kevin and Reese come to in what looks like a great stone library, but it turns out that the place is much bigger than they thought and is located in some strange other dimension. The prologue ends and chapter 1 begins as they explore their surroundings. The cube starts glowing again and activates the entire place, which ends up serving as the main hub for the rest of the game. It has everything from a tree that provides food items, to a pool that restores CP, to a stone monument where weapons and items can be purchased. On closer examination, the stone monument lists this area as the Hermit's Garden. Kevin comes up with the theory that this place is similar to the other dimensions where the real tetracyclic towers were sealed in SC. Once all preparations are made, Kevin and Reese step onto the glowing blue portal at the top of the stairs. They are transported to a different dimensional space and are immediately greeted not by regular monsters, but by fiends that are mentioned in the church testaments. They're baffled that the higher elements, space, mirage, and time are active here, but there's nothing else they can do but explore. The two encounter various other fiends and finally come across a small glowing cube that is warm to the touch. The voice from the original cube tells them to return to the garden and raise this new cube, called a sealing stone, to the stone monument. A warp function activates in the artifact, allowing them quick access back to the garden. Back at the hub, they prepare themselves in case enemies were to appear, then release the sealing stone. Who would have guessed that it would contain little Tita? A barrier back in the Jade Corridor is seen to dissipate as well. Tita panics a bit after remembering being engulfed by a white light while preparing dinner with her dad, but she calms down after Kevin and Reese share that they were brought here by a white light as well. Tita joins the two girls Ritter's exploration team and they all return to the Jade Corridor. They come across a previously blocked off section that holds a glowing door with a moon on it. It asks for and describes a person in which Tita would match said details. This is the first of the moon, star, and sun doors in this game, which hold vital details about characters' backgrounds, as well as events for future games. I will be condensing the necessary lore in order to enjoy the Crossbell and Erebonia arcs in a future video after finishing the third's main story summary. They continue in their exploration and come across the Arcee of all things. No one appears to be inside, but they find another sealing stone. Captain Julia Schwartz emerges from the object, having also been engulfed by the same white light that transported her here. After settling the initial confusion, she also joins the team. The group finally descends on a big floating cube back at the Jade Corridor. Due to their church training, Kevin and Reese notice a faint rotting smell up ahead, which is indicative of something of the underworld. An ominous purple glow summons forth one of the 77 devils that is described in the church testaments. It transforms once during the battle, but the four are eventually able to defeat it. The long silver-haired man from all the way back in Gransel appears again and introduces himself as Schwartz Ritter. He delivers a message of how his lord wishes to see them suffer in this land of Phantasma. Kevin and Reese are shocked that he knows of Reese's sister, but he disappears before anything else can be said, bringing Chapter 1 to a close. Sky the Third includes many flashback scenes of Kevin, Reese, and Rufina as they were growing up. There's a brief one of the first time the two girls meet a young Kevin. They're just returning from shopping when they notice a young boy in an alleyway with his head down. Rufina offers the boy chocolate, but he tells them to get lost. Rufina resorts to nothing a normal person would do. She takes a bite of the chocolate and transfers the piece in her mouth to Kevin's in a kiss. To no surprise, Kevin is absolutely flustered, and the flashback ends as Rufina officially introduces herself and her little sister Reese. Back in the Hermit's Garden, the group discusses their new pieces of information, that Schwartz Ritter called this dimension Phantasma, and to answer Julia's implied question, Reese confirms that her older sister died sometime in the past. Kevin says that there could have been a possibility that Rufina had met that Schwartz Ritter guy during one of her past secret missions, but there's really no way to know for sure. The only thing that they can do is enter the newly created portal at the very end of the Jade Corridor. The four are transported to what seems exactly like the southern block of Gransel, though on closer inspection, it's very odd since not a single human soul is out. Actually, tons of armored fiends are wandering the streets. The group worries over whether something happened to the city while they were gone, or that perhaps Phantasma can now influence the outside world. They begin heading in the direction of the castle, only to find an ominous orange magic circle sealing the palace entrance shut. They explore the rest of the city that is currently accessible to them, eventually finding a sealing stone in the Erebonian embassy. Some barriers are lifted and the sun begins to set in Gransel once the stone is presented to the stone monument. Major Vander emerges and is filled in on the details by Julia. Reese is quiet for some time, then draws the conclusion that it can't be a coincidence that all the people who have been drawn into Phantasma so far all know each other. The thought is kept in mind as Muller now joins the party. Kevin and the others explore the newly accessible areas until they reach the port district. They strangely find the Bobcat docked in the harbor with the doors completely locked. The keys turn up in one of the warehouses, but not before they have to fight off the first appearance of ghosts. They find another sealing stone in the Bobcat, which unsurprisingly contains Josette. She definitely doesn't take being transported to Phantasma very well, but ultimately agrees to cooperate with the others. Night falls in Gransel, prompting ghosts to appear in the streets. They eventually make it to the Grand Arena where they face off against a massive Archaism, the very same one that was summoned during the first meeting with LeBlanc in SC. The Sealing Stone this time lifts the magic barrier from the castle entrance and happens to contain Joshua. He's easily convinced that Phantasma is not just an illusion since Reese, a person he's never met before, is present. An illusion could only feasibly draw on the knowledge of the person it's trying to deceive. Joshua was in Crossbell with Estelle before being engulfed in the white light, and Muller mentions that he was in Erebonia prior to being transported here. Julia asks Kevin if an artifact could be powerful enough to reach such far-off places, but he answers that only something on the scale of the Septarians could exert that much influence. The fact that the Aureole still hasn't been recovered is brought up, and Kevin can't rule out the possibility that it's somehow involved. But ultimately, they still hold too little information to make any conclusions. The party finally enters a castle only to find it completely devoid of people except for some creepy ghosts lurking around. They inspect the grounds and eventually find Gilbert up on the garden terrace. It turns out that he was initially transported to the port district of Gransel and had to keep fleeing from the fiends until he found his way to the palace. He runs off on his own again, but the group can't be bothered to go after him. The party encounters a female ghost which leaves a treasury key for them out on the balcony of the Queen's royal chambers. They're able to unlock the door to the room containing the elevator that leads to the ancient ruins below the castle. Julia and Kevin notice how the layout of the ruins is completely different from the real one. In the furthest room, a masked figure introduces itself as the Lord of Phantasma. It confirms what Kevin was guessing, that Gransel this entire time was just an illusory copy created by this masked figure. The Lord of Phantasma offers them a sealing stone if they're able to overcome the devil that is summoned. After a tough battle, the figure keeps its word and presents the stone to them. Kevin grows agitated as the Lord of Phantasma answers their questions cryptically, though us, the players, can see that Kevin knows exactly what's being talked about. He viciously shoots multiple arrows from his crossbow straight at the figure, which turns out to be just a copy of the real Lord of Phantasma. Reese can tell that Kevin is acting strangely, but everything is brushed aside as they have another sealing stone to unlock. Chapter 2 is then brought to a close. There's another flashback scene where young Reese wakes Kevin up from a recurring nightmare about his mom. In the dream, said mother is apologizing for failing him. After waking up, Kevin apologizes for always causing trouble for Reese, especially on Rufina's big promotion day to a squire of the Gralsritter. Kevin shows his tsundere side towards the older girl, but Reese and Rufina see right through it and tease him. They recall fond memories together since Kevin joined them 5 years ago, but then the younger two become sad that Rufina is leaving for a busy job. They wonder why she had to become a Gralsritter squire instead of some sister at the local chapel. Apparently, the church higher-ups noticed that she had the aptitude for becoming one of the Gralsritter, so in order to help others as best she could, she wanted to do what make the most of her abilities. The flashback ends as Chapter 3 begins. Chloe appears with Sieg once the sealing stone is released. She says she must do all she can to help the team since Phantasma could pose a threat to her nation. Before they enter the new portal, the other party members make an odd statement of how they wonder where Wiseman has gone or what he's been up to. Reese is about to mention the official report, but Kevin quickly butts in that no one in the church knows what happened to him and that it's still an ongoing investigation. He goes on further, saying Wiseman's personality doesn't fit that of the Lord of Phantasma, since he's not the kind to hide behind a mask. Reese doesn't look happy with Kevin, but holds her tongue. In this new dimensional plane, the pathway splits into 2 roads, one that is golden and one that is silver. The ghost they met in Gransel Castle appears, and the group can finally hear her completely. It turns out that she was the voice speaking to them through the artifact. They're told that Kevin must step through one road, while Reese must step through the other at the same time. The entire party decides to split into 2 groups of 4 to provide equal assistance to them both. On the Golden Road, Kevin and friends immediately face off against strange-looking monsters. It turns out that they were gremlins found in folktales, and the rest of the place contains a bunch of similar creatures. Before they can get to the exit, 4 mirrors and a figure who appears to be Reese blocks their path. After enough damage is dealt, the figure reveals its true blob-like form. They're eventually able to defeat all the fiends, including the one that disguised itself as Reese. And Reese and her party are also ambushed immediately by fairy tale creatures after entering the Silver Road. After making their way through the place, 5 death chariots and another fiend disguised as Father Kevin appear to block their exit. Afterwards, Reese is visibly relieved that it wasn't really him, and the two groups are happily reunited. Kevin mentions that the creatures that were able to take on another appearance are called grimoires in the church testaments. They're not really fiends, but what souls eventually turn into after being thrown into Gehenna. Schwartzritter shows up again, impressed that they've made it so far with just a small bit of the Hermit's guidance. He offers another cryptic message from the Lord he serves, part of it stating how the flames of Gehenna will burn ever fiercer. Kevin starts to lose it a little, laughing, then taunting the figure, then threatening him with his crossbow. He says that Schwartzritter and his master are just bluffing once the group is alone again. Then they all return to the garden to unlock some more sealing stones. Another flashback shows Kevin's appointment to Squire of the Gralsritter. It turns out that Ein Selnate, the first Dominion, was the one to train Kevin for his position. She congratulates him on becoming a dog of the church like the rest of them, but Kevin implies that he'd prefer Rufina not be included in that metaphor. Speaking of the devil, Rufina shows up to congratulate Kevin on his official induction as well. The two think of visiting Reese back at home after being gone for so long. Then Kevin heads off to get the rest of his stuff, leaving Rufina and Ein to discuss his incredible potential. It turns out that not only Ein can sense the possibility of a stigma manifesting in him, but Rufina surprisingly can as well. Since only other Dominion are able to do this, it demonstrates how capable Rufina is even though she has no stigma. It's implied that she was able to stand toe-to-toe with the Blade Lord of Ouroboros during one of her missions even. Before the flashback ends, Rufina mentions how Kevin's one weakness, his kindness, will eventually drive him into a corner one day. The beginning of Chapter 4 sees the group's reunion with Olivier and Zin. They quickly catch on to the whole situation, Olivier asking Kevin if he has any idea who the antagonists really are. He asks because he's noticed that they seem fixated on Kevin and Reese especially, but Kevin easily shrugs him off, saying it looks more like they're enemies of the Gralsritter as a whole than just him and Reese. Reese seems like she wants to say something during the whole conversation, then finally addresses Kevin, stating she's not feeling well and that she'll be sitting out for now. She apologizes to everyone, then takes off. Kevin goes after her, asking if she feels left out because everyone else already knows each other. She delivers a tough question to him, asking when he's gonna stop acting. Reese admits that she was feeling a bit left out and jealous, especially since everyone else has experienced such tough situations together as a team. She was aware of all the rumors going around the church that Kevin was blaming and punishing himself for Rufina's death. So even though it hurt knowing that he was getting to know other people while avoiding her for 5 years, she was happy to see that Kevin had made new friends, until she realized that he hasn't shown them his real self at all, keeping everyone at an arm's distance. Kevin says she's got it all wrong, but she's not buying it. She knows that he knows the meaning behind all the cryptic messages from their foes. Finally, Kevin passively accuses Reese of jumping to far-off conclusions since she's upset with him. He still takes responsibility for the way he's avoided her in the past, but ultimately thinks they need to drop the negative thinking. She slaps him, telling him his words are meaningless, then rushes off. Joshua approaches Kevin, and the latter asks how much he's researched into him. It turns out that Joshua knows he's the heretic hunter for the church, and that he only harms those that are deemed too irredeemable. Joshua asks for confirmation that Kevin was responsible for Wiseman's demise, and the Dominion coolly claims that he used everyone he met in SC to his own ends in order to take down Wiseman. He claims that he purposefully let Estelle get abducted by the professor so he could figure out what Wiseman and Joshua were up to. Despite confirmation of all these things, Joshua says knowing Kevin's true intentions still doesn't change how grateful he is to him, since the artificial stigma couldn't have shattered if not for the Dominion's help. Finally, Joshua asks to fill in for Reese while she's resting. The party enters the new portal and is transported to an area that looks exactly like the Bracer training grounds in Lemon State. They must fight off some new baddies, then are given a map of the place by the female ghost. The first destination is the old sewers that is now covered in lava. In the furthest room, they must fight a grimoire that's disguised as Annalise. They are presented with a sealing stone upon victory, and unsurprisingly, it contains said bracer. The next area is the forest region. They face off against a Shara-looking grimoire, then recover Shara herself from the resulting stone. Finally, they make their way through Grimsel Fortress, which happens to have a lot more puzzles than before. An agate figure greets them at the end, and the Bracer himself appears from a stone upon victory. Night has fallen by the time they return to the fourth plane. The massive devil Astarte, one of the gatekeepers of Gehenna, is summoned outside. It traps them in a much more powerful version of Wiseman's evil eye, but is stopped by Reese before it can deal a finishing blow. She does an impressive job at first, with quick strikes from her sword, summons of high-level magic, and dodging of various attacks. Kevin yells at her not to push her luck, but her response is that she must try in order to uphold the Gralsritter name, but especially because she wants to protect him, just as he and Rufina protected her in the past. Unfortunately, Astarte quickly teleports and attacks her from behind. She would have faced her demise if not for Kevin's sudden burst of power. He activates his stigma, shatters the evil eye, and gains a new S-craft. He coldly brands the devil Astarte as a heretic to be hunted, with no chance of redemption, launching them all into battle. The Lord of Phantasma appears after Kevin grabs the sealing stone. The antagonist asks Kevin if he would like to see his, or her, face. Reese rushes between them, commanding the figure to stop playing mind games and tormenting Kevin with cryptic nonsense. But the Lord of Phantasma reveals that the only reason the words could be considered as such is because Kevin chooses not to believe them himself. Back in the garden, we finally gain our shining protagonist from the previous Sky Games. Everyone is elated to see Estelle again, but just as Kevin gets his chance to say hi, Estelle notices that he doesn't look so good. He drops to his knees and tells Reese to take over the cube and to keep moving on. Joshua rushes over, worried that the power the Dominion demonstrated is the cause. Then Kevin completely collapses. And that's where we're going to end part 1 of this summary. Hope you all enjoyed it. Poor Kevin though. Next video will begin with Reese in the spotlight for a bit, and will ultimately wrap up the main story summary for the third, so consider subscribing so you don't miss out. And until next time, take care, see ya!